Let me get our guests involved in this discussion and get their perspective on it. Turning first to London, we have Middle East consultant Peter Eyre joining us by Skype. Hi, Peter. Welcome to the program.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening. What's your take on what exactly is going on in Yemen? And tell me what you think right now the role of Saudi Arabia and the United States is playing while this power play is going on.
Well, it's quite obvious they're buying for time because they want to get a government in that's user-friendly to America. Obviously, the people are out on the street. They want change, like most of the Middle East countries do at the moment. And we see this domino effect all around the trouble areas where they're demanding change. And if democracy prevails, then obviously a transitional government should be implemented as soon as possible. And as the gentleman said in Yemen, that 3 months timescale should be the maximum because these people are going to keep taking to the streets until they get their way. That's what democracy is all about. And one has to ask the question, how serious is the illness with Salah? Because a week ago, he was fine and going to return in a couple of days. Over the last few days, he's been critical, and no one seems to know. If America wants him out and Saudi wants him out, then keep him there. Why send him back at all?
Okay. All right. Welcoming also from Washington, former Pentagon officer, Mr. Michael Maloof. Thank you so much for being with us. How do you see it?
Sure.
How do you see it, sir? How likely is this transitional council going to be formed soon? How likely do you think that this is to happen?
Well, the opposition can form a council, but the question will be what capability will they have in moving the process along toward a peaceful conclusion. Right now, this minute, it doesn't appear that way. And I think once again, you got to look to the external powers of Saudi Arabia and the United States as far as wanting to keep in place someone who they have that they can help them maintain their continuing influence. The United States has put a tremendous amount of money and backing into Yemen to fight al-Qaeda forces and their counter-terrorism activities, but that's really to help Saudi Arabia to a large degree. Plus, you have AQAP, the Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which is gaining strength from all of this chaos, and they're getting more news coverage, frankly, and they are scoring, and they have taken over some towns, and that doesn't bode well. So I think from the U.S. perspective, they see a very chaotic situation. They don't see it leaving soon. The question is who would be adequate to and that would satisfy them in replacing President Saleh, and as well satisfy the Saudis. The
Okay.
Saudis are quite concerned. I mean, they just had some of their border guards just shot and killed on the Yemeni border, and as I have indicated earlier, I wouldn't doubt that if it gets any more chaotic and the Saudis feel that they're losing a grip on stability in their neighboring country, that they could reintroduce troops into that country to maintain that stability.
Well, how many troops?
It's
how
a very
many troops do
precarious
they
situation
have?
right now.
Well, Michael, I mean, you're saying introduce troops into that country. I mean, how many troops does Saudi have, and how many countries do they want to send their troops in? We know that they've sent their troops into Bahrain already. How likely is that to happen? That they would send even more troops now to Yemen?
I think you cannot rule out that possibility. Yemen, after all, is right next door. If they sent troops into Bahrain, I think that shows they have a limited power projection capability. But the threat is very imminent from their perspective, right next door because of the chaos. They don't have a grip on who the opposition will be. I have not heard the Saudis talk about who they would like to see as an alternative to Saleh. And that doesn't bode well either. So, and again, stability for the Saudis is really critical. And when you look at all of the region, the entire region, in terms of these popular uprisings, the autocratic regimes are winning, and the United States has been backing that. And that's because of the urgency and need for stability from their perspective. and especially with Yemen because of AQAP. And Al Qaeda is a potential problem, and being right next door to Saudi Arabia, I think the Saudis are very concerned about that prospect as well, seeping into the kingdom. In fact, there have been some Al Qaeda hits in Saudi Arabia, and I think they want to diminish that if they can. They have a limited amount of force projection. The United States is giving them all kinds of military assistance, and they can do with it as they will. The question is, does U.S. policy, does U.S. law allow the Saudis to take U.S. military origin equipment into these other countries? And technically, it doesn't allow that unless they get U.S. permission. So either the U.S. is giving tacit permission, or the Saudis are acting illegally, but the United States isn't saying anything, which helps the United States extend that aura of stability as far as they're concerned, or try to maintain it.
Okay.
The United States is not supporting any democratic protests, I can tell you that much.
All right. Now, Peter, at this point in time in Yemen itself, now we have various reports saying that basically now Saleh's son has taken over, Ali Ahmad, and really not allowing the vice president even in the presidential palace. How likely is it that even amongst those who say that they are for the government, that there could be even another split from within?
I think the issue here is that if the son is in a position to take over his father's role as an interim or whatever, you've still got who is controlling the military. And whoever's got control of the military in the chaos that's there at the moment obviously has control of the country. The gentleman in the States was just saying about American intervention. We have to understand that quite a few times Saudis already crossed incursions into the country and has suffered the consequences of that, because they really don't have the manpower to take on the situation that's on hand there. And the last incident, when the Saudi Air Force did participate and carry out incursions into Yemen, in northern Yemen, so were the American Air Force. There were extensive military strikes by the U.S. into that area. And now, of course, it looks like the drones are coming in on the scene, and this, to me, will just aggravate the situation. I would like to make one correction here, which I totally disagree with. I don't know the gentleman, and I don't want to insult his intelligence in any shape or form. What I would like to say is there is no threat from Al Qaeda. It's quite debatable if Al Qaeda actually exists. I think it's just a legal pseudonym that was attached to militant groups around the world by the U.S. to make things more legal. There is no threat from the Western aspect of Al Qaeda. Please understand this. I think we've had more false flags incidents in the West that are self-inflicted rather than from Islamic countries.
Well, Peter, let me jump in here with what you just said. Peter, let me just jump in here with what you're just saying. And Michael was referring to a recent attack that was said that it was because of Al-Qaeda. And, of course, the Saudis were very upset about it. And also the Americans now, as you have just talked about, has gotten their drone attacks and drone strikes going a lot more. So what then is going on? If there isn't Al-Qaeda, as you're saying there, then what exactly is going on? Well,
before the Al-Qaeda topic came onto the debate, which is only in more recent times, the actual incursions across the border were a sort of a Shiite breakaway group. And Saudi was very concerned, as they are in Bahrain, that the Shiites are a majority in Bahrain, and there's a distinct suppression there that they don't want the Shiites to come into power. In the Saudi case, they didn't want Shiites extending into their territory on the border with Yemen. And so that was the conflict. And when they did carry out the incursions, it wasn't against this pseudonym Al-Qaeda. It was against breakaway elements. And as you would seen around the world, minority groups generally become the victim of the greater party. And in this case, that was the case in northern Yemen. Suddenly, this breakaway group has been given the tag of Al-Qaeda. I really sincerely believe Al-Qaeda doesn't exist, and it never existed.
Okay, well, that's a whole nother show there, definitely, Peter. But let me go back to Michael. Now, Michael, at this point in time with the situation that is on the ground in Yemen, what has to be done in order for the people to get what they want? They say they want a transitional council and that they want an official end to the regime of Saleh. How likely are they to get that?
Well, unless Saleh capitulates, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to realize their dream.
Why is
Frankly, with his son taking over like that, it really reinforces the fact that Saleh really wants to hang in there as long as he can. And again, I think that this has been done to some extent with the acquiescence of the United States and with Saudi Arabia, simply because the transitional group, I think, is not prepared is not strong enough. It certainly does not control the military, and in fact, Saleh's family controls all critical elements of the military, and that's a very, very major issue. And they can have arms and what have you, but unless Saleh's end capitulates, you're going to have a full-blown civil war.
But how long can it really take place when you have the majority of the country, people coming out on a daily basis, obviously not working, bringing the country to a halt, basically? How long can the government continue with such repression?
Well, I think as long as Saleh and his family feel emboldened by the United States and Saudi Arabia, they can hang in there as long as they want. And as long as the military stays loyal, I think that will be the case. Now, unlike Egypt, the military in Egypt, of course, moved over to support the demonstrators. I have not seen too much movement to that degree in Yemen as yet. There have been some elements, certainly, but certainly not the major group. They're still remaining predominantly loyal to the regime, from what I can tell from here.
Okay, now, Peter, what's your take on it all at this point in time, the perspective of the United States? Do you think that they have realized that for sure Saleh is out? And if they have, what do you pursue? What do you perceive? What do they want next? Do you have any names of any individuals or any groups that would be more likely to continue on the same line as Saleh?
Well, just before we continue on that topic, let's just reflect back on Egypt, because Egypt was discussed just now. Basically, Mubarak was a U.S. puppet, and slowly the people in the streets took over and obviously demanded change. And when that takes over at such a phenomenal rate as happened in Cairo, obviously the government has to listen to this, and then America sees that the cards are turning against them, and so then denounces Mubarak, the very person that they supported and they pumped all the money in. Saleh was an American creation, and the gentleman said, rightfully so, they put a lot of money into Yemen. But please, I have to emphasize, money cannot buy democracy. There is an underlying tone here, and this has never been discussed. America has always wanted a base in Yemen. Socotra Island, which is on the Horn of Africa, is vital to the Americans to set up as a base. They've always wanted it, and before the Americans, it was the British protectorate. I myself was based in Aden. It was a British protectorate. That the West has always wanted it, and for one very good reason, because it's the gateway to trade, all the traffic through the Suez to Europe, to the UK, and to America, and that is vital. And if they can control that, if they can turn traffic on and turn it off, if there's any dispute, for instance, with Iran, they just stop Iranian ships from going through there. This is a critical, strategical base that they need, and it should never be allowed. This is part of the geopolitical war that's going on at the moment.
So you're telling me a lot of this that's going on, Peter, is related to the United States wanting control over that area?
For sure, absolutely, 100%. If you look at the geopolitical plan, the Gulf of Aden has always been a critical gateway that they've wished to control. And for as far back as I can remember, when we pulled out, the Americans have always expressed an interest there. And I think there's an undertone here that is not being revealed.
Okay. Now, almost out of time, but Michael, let me go back to you and tell me, what will it take now for this transition to actually take place? If you were in charge of those people on the streets, what do you think that they would have to do in order to basically get the power in their hands?
Well, I think they first of all need to convince military leaders to come to their side. Number two, they need to outline who would be comprising that government, what their platforms would be, how they would run things differently, call for early elections, outline a basic roadmap of toward an actual transition. Just having people present and saying we're here isn't sufficient. I think people need to see what is going on. Plus, they need to be talking very actively with the United States and with the Saudis. I would agree that the United States learned its lesson, frankly, in turning on Mubarak because it really upset the Saudis, and the United States cannot afford to do that a second time. That's why you've seen the United States, unfortunately, back up the regime in Bahrain and are placating to the Saudis and trying to hang in there with Salih. But it's not clear that the transitional council representatives have convinced the United States and indeed the Saudis that they are really capable of an alternative that will ensure some stability and in Yemen. And I have not seen that happen just yet.
Okay, and on that note, I'd like to thank you, Michael Maloof, former Pentagon officer from Washington. Peter Eyre, joined us via Skype, Middle East consultant, London.